Well, what I first remember, I just had come back from a trip from New York where I met with a bunch of mayors about their broadband systems and successes and failures, because we were thinking about rolling that out. So I came back and it was late at night. I went to bed, must have been about 1:30, and all of a sudden about 3:30 in the morning, my cell phone starts ringing, and so I race around to try to find where it is, and by the time I pick it up, it stopped ringing, and then my hardline phone starts ringing, and I race around and miss that, and then I realized it's Harold Dominguez is calling me, so I called him back, and I go, Harold, what's going on? And I said, is the sky falling? And he goes, yeah, it's literally falling in buckets of rain. And he said that we needed to declare an emergency declaration, because that gets, different things in place. So I said, sure, go whatever you need. And, after that, I could hardly even sleep. So I wake up about 5:30 in the morning and go down to the disaster center that they'd set up. And it was pretty intense. I think, some of the questions that came from the public right away was why we didn't have more warning. People wanted to know, particularly in the neighborhood right below us. It was the Greens neighborhood. And before that flooded, my wife and I walked our dog through that neighborhood. It must have been about 11:30. And I noticed as we were leaving that neighborhood, all these crawdads were climbing out of the ditch, hundreds of them. And I'm saying to Kristen, this means something. These crawdads know something that we don't know. And sure enough, like 45 minutes later, that whole neighborhood was flooded. So there really wasn't much warning. I think they may have had 10 minutes of warning to evacuate that neighborhood. But people, expect that we're supposed to know everything. That was a neighborhood that wasn't even on the floodplain. But, what happens when a river jumps out of its banks, then your whole floodplain maps don't mean anything when the river is pushed to the other side of the railroad tracks. So it was pretty intense.
Indeed. Just to back up, what was Harold's position with the city when you called?
Harold was the city manager.
Okay. And when you said floodplain, that you meant the FEMA identified floodplain where people need to buy flood insurance.
Right, yeah. And so people that lived in that neighborhood had no insurance. In fact, I have a really good friend who bought a house 3 days before that flood hit. I mean, it was just bad timing. It was Brandon Schaefer, but it was pretty intense. But
and Mary Bagley, anything to add? What your experience was?
I remember a similar story. Getting a call from Harold Dominguez. He was calling us throughout the previous evening, and the first call we got when, meaning me, as one of city council at the time, he said, "Look, things are getting kind of dicey, and the rain's not stopping." I remember getting my kids and my wife, and hey, let's go down and see the flood, thinking a couple of feet outside the banks. And so we drove down Main Street and went to the river down there near Ken Pratt in Maine, and the water was literally even with the bottom of the bridge. And I remember looking at my wife, Yvonne, and saying, this is going to be bad. And so sure enough, the calls started coming in the middle of the night. And my biggest memory, and what I remember most about the flood, is how much Longmont came together. Nearly all of City Council was in the emergency center, doing the things that, staff, literally every member of staff was manning the Memorial Center, the Senior Center, making makeshift beds and facilities to take care of people who had been displaced. A couple of things come to mind. One was then the Mayor Pro Tem, I think it was Gabe Santos. Right. And Gabe and I went out with Harold Dominguez and one of our directors, the Public Works Director, Dale Rodemaker, and we were assigned to go out as a pair to check out where the river had jumped its bank. And so we went out onto a county road out west, and we're sitting there and we're watching the floodwaters continuing to come in and increasingly flooding agriculture and heading to Longmont. And one of the engineers out there is like, yeah, this is just too bad. And we were all asking, well, what are we going to do about it? He goes, you got to get that river back in the channel. And the only way to do it is to demolish this road. And we kind of looked at this bulldozer, we're like, let's demolish the road. So we called the county commissioners and...
Yeah, I basically had a really good relationship with the county commissioners, so I handled that interface. I said, you know, this is the only county road left that you guys have that hasn't been ruined. Can we go ahead and ruin it for you? So we cut this big trench through it to get the water to move back to its old channel and to reduce the flow into the Greens neighborhoods.
Yep, and we did it. So we sat there and watched him just start to dig it up. Yeah. And spent a couple hours just ripping up the county road, and it put the river back in its bank and saved millions of dollars. And we did not have any loss of life during this event either.
Yeah,
and
that was amazing.
It was amazing. City staff and our emergency department, our police and first responders and fire department were just exceptional.